Hey everybody, I hope you're having a great week. So I thought I'd do this video to talk a little bit about my progress over the past week. I wasn't able to do a live stream because I was feeling a little bit under the weather. However, I have been busy. So if you've been following along with the past couple weeks, you see that I've been building this DJ app. It's open source and you can find it on the GitHub in the link in the description below. And this is meant to be a journey just into what it's like developing a audio application and some of the things that you run into, some of the struggles and some of the learning lessons. So one of the latest learning lessons has been setting up this track list view. So as you can see, if you've been following along, we finally have a track list view. So if you're familiar with applications like Serato or Tractor, you know that it's pretty standard to have some sort of view that displays what tracks that you have that you can select to play. And that's what we finally have. One of the struggles that I had a few weeks ago was that we were using this class called the TableListBox. And one of my misunderstandings about the TableListBox class was that I thought that it was just going to be kind of like an Excel grid that you just pipe data into, whereas the TableListBox class is actually more for observing a piece of data. So in this case, it's an XML document that actually holds all of our tracks in them and shows what sort of data that we're trying to display. And it observes this, and then it creates a table dynamically based on the data that it's observing. So in this case, it's observing an XML document, and it is displaying the corresponding data in this juice component, this visual component that we see on the screen. So I'm just going to walk you through a little bit of that and show you some of the things that I've done, also some of the ways that I plan to extend this the current functionality of this. So currently the way that it functions, it's a little bit works on my machine, but it wouldn't work if you clone the repo. It wouldn't work just straight out of the box on your computer, and I can show you why that would be the case, and some ways that we would be able to extend it, make it a little bit more usable. So I'm going to go ahead and stop the application now. And the first thing that I'll show you is the XML track list class. So this is a class that I created that essentially creates this XML document that we see here. So if you're not familiar with XML documents, it's a very common way on the web to display and hold data for various things. And what we have here is we have this XML track list class, and as I said before, one thing that you'll find is that currently I've just hard-coded some of my paths that are on my own computer in here. So I've put the XML directory into my resources folder that's inside the code base. So if you clone the repo, you'll actually get the XML folder and the XML document rather, and what I need to do is I just need to make this, either put this in the user documents folder, or I would need to use a relative path that would put it into the proper folder. Same thing with the track list directory. So currently I have just a few music tracks that are on my desktop. The idea in the future, in the very near future, would be that as you select new tracks in new directories, that what would happen is that it would dynamically add to your library and keep the paths to that stored. So as you can see, the paths are currently stored on that are applied to my computer, but they wouldn't work on anybody else's. And that at the moment what would happen is that there's only one. This doesn't dynamically extend. So basically there's only one location that it would look for tracks. But what you would want to do eventually is you would want to have it where as the user adds more paths, so a lot of times you have music files that are stored on various parts of your computer, and that as you add new paths, it would just add those to the library. So you could have something that's in your music folder, you can have some that are on your desktop, and so on. So that's very much in line with what you would normally see on a DJ application. We also have this section at the top where we have some different categories. So at the moment, I just have title, artist, and the path. And I'll show you exactly how I do that. So I'm actually using the meta tag library that allows us to pull tags from audio files. And I'll show you how that happens as well. So as I was saying, this class that we're looking at right now is the XML track list. So what we have is this will write you a XML file from scratch. So it'll create the class, create the XML document from an XML from scratch that gives you the header data of title, artist, and path. And then what it does is pardon me, it then you then have this library data, add library data function that will go into a directory of your choosing. So you can just choose what directory that you want. Then you essentially, at the moment I just have it to waves and MP3s, but you can add AIFFs, other audio files in here as well, which we'll want to do. And basically it'll find all of those, and then for every track in the track directory, we're using this third-party library that gets the metadata from the file, pops it, then it basically pops it into the appropriate, what would you call it, attribute. So we have an attribute called title, and then so it's reading the metadata, popping it into that place, the artist, and the path. So I can go in here. Actually, this is another addition, which is that I've made this little tag reader wrapper that's around the third-party library. So where is that at? So if I just jump into deck. So I've created this small little class called tag reader. Like I said, it's a wrapper around this third-party library called taglib, and in here I just have a static function that what it does is, the reason that I've done static is so you don't want to create a tag reader object in order to scan for your metadata. You just want to use a static method that you can call, just like what I've done here, where I'm just calling this, but I didn't actually create an object called tag reader. You don't have to do that with a static method. So there's one existing method that you can just call without creating an object. And what that does is that creates this metadata, creates a metadata object. So let me just pull in what that means. So this metadata is just a struct, so just a collection of strings of all of the different things that we're currently looking for in metadata, so title, artist, album, so on and so forth. And it just stores them in one place. And then what I'm doing is I am then taking that and I'm pulling it in from the tag reading library, and then I'm just popping it into the XML document like so. So that metadata is getting pulled in by the tag reader, and then I'm just routing it into the XML document. Then the question becomes, how do you actually display this in your application? So great, now we have an XML document, and how do we actually display it? That's when this other class called TrackListView comes in. Pardon me. So I actually, the Juice website actually has a really excellent tutorial on this, and I don't know how in the world I would have ever figured this out on my own. It probably would have taken me over a week just to figure out how to properly use this. But as I mentioned before, we have this class called TableListBox. I thought that this was originally more of a class that was something like an Excel spreadsheet, and that you manually create the different cells, but it's actually dynamically observing the data that's in this XML, and it dynamically meaning automatically creates new cells that display the attributes in their proper place, in the proper columns, and so on. And it's taken a little bit of work to do that. We have this class that's inside of TrackListView that I have called TrackListCell. So this is one that allows us to. So this is one of the actual cells that's inside the application itself, like this. And as you can see, I could double click and I could edit it. Currently, it's not set to, because what you would ideally want in this situation is to be able to edit this track, and then it once again goes back from the track from this view back to the audio file, right? So you need a way to write it back to the audio file that this is representing. Currently, it does not do that, but luckily TagLib actually has a tag writer as well. So what we'll be able to do is actually create that workflow that allows you to edit from this track, edit from this view back to the audio metadata in the audio file itself. Okay, so then there are these various methods. I'm going to be honest, I actually just took quite a bit of this and just from the Juice tutorial on TableListBox. It's on the Juice website, and I actually just adapted it to my needs in this particular situation. Then the larger class is a TableListBox model. So the model is the data representation of this XML document here. Okay, so that's what we're doing. Then we have various methods that set the width, that describe when you have another piece of data, what you want the cell to look like, what you want what the row background looks like, and I'll show you that now. Once again, a lot of it there's a lot of it that I just adapted from the Juice tutorial. I think this is one of these classes that if somebody didn't show you how it's meant to be used, I think it would be quite difficult to actually be able to pull all of that apart and actually figure that out. So luckily there was that tutorial there. So I'm using this little helper function called ignore unused because we're not using width or height in here, and this actually silences a warning that would happen. And what we're doing is we have if you take a look at what we have here, there are only three tracks here, so it might be a little bit difficult for you to see, but every other row is colored a little bit differently, so it doesn't just look like one long list. There's like a little bit of look and feel there, and we'll go through that, and we'll make that look a lot better once we get the actual functionality straightened out. Same thing with now we got the paint cell. We have this boolean of if the row is selected, so that's what allows us to have that little selector there. Then what you can do is then you're drawing the text, which is of course the text from the XML. Then so that's pretty straightforward. Then you have this this refresh component for cell. What this does, this actually creates a new component. So for each one of the cells, so if you have a new piece of data that you need to display in your XML, then what it would do is it would call this refresh component for cell, and then basically it would say, if the column is the first column, which is title, then it creates a cell. Then you have to know which piece of data that you need to pull from, and then so on and so forth. So this would be I should probably put comments in here that just say track, artist, and path, and we'll add more of these as well. Then everything else is kind of helper methods. Once again, derive these from the Fantastic Juice tutorial that they have, and just use those, and then eventually piped in the data. So that's really it for that. Some of the ways that I want to extend off of this, as I mentioned before, are that currently it's set to only point to one path at a time. Obviously, a user would have multiple paths where their music files are probably stored in different folders and different directories. So each time that a user adds a new directory, you want this to dynamically populate the XML, which in turn populates this track list view. Also, you want to have some sort of drag and drop functionality. So one thing that I would like to do is where you can click and grab one of the songs here and then drop it into the audio player, and it loads. So that's why one of the pieces of metadata that's particularly important there is this is the path, because then it's going to know where it needs to load the audio file from. So I'm sure you can see where that's going. Then the other main thing is that we need to make this the XML directory. We need to either make this relative, or we need to have this class look for the XML in some sort of user documents. Then you're going to have to create a whole bunch of just different scenarios around that. So things like if an XML doesn't exist, then it creates a new XML. The other thing is, if it's looking for a piece of data, if it's looking for something and doesn't find it, what does it display to the user there? Then the other thing was, like I said before, being able to extend off of the track list directory, being able to make that dynamically populate rather than replace what songs are existing in this library. So if you're interested in that sort of thing, into tag reading, tag writing, being able to display data, all of those things, they're things that aren't really what you would call the fun things, the DSP things in audio software development, but they are things that I think really have a lot of really wider applications. So you would need to be able to do something like that, like like that. If, for instance, if you were doing anything on the web and you needed to grab some data from an XML, be able to parse it and be able to put it sensibly to the user. So I hope that you found that useful. Once again, you can grab the code on the on github.com/the audio programmer. Link is in the description below, and I appreciate you following me along on this journey, and I'm hoping that it's going to become more interesting soon. So have a great day, and I will speak to you soon.